Yeah, we're live. Right before noon too, 11:59. Nailed it. How's everybody doing? It is New Year's Eve. We're ending up 2023 and going into 2024. Hopefully, you guys got some projects done. As I told you guys I would, didn't get two of the things done. I wanted to also get the 5-liter Ford, the Mustang, picked up from Roswell, New Mexico, with all the alien technology that it has. And also get the Z running. We did get the Omni done, but not the other two. So two, 1 out of 3. So I'm not batting very, I don't have a very high batting percentage right now. But we had a lot of cool stuff to talk about. And the poll for today, I'm going to get that up like right away. So the poll is Gen 5 M90. Okay, so the question is, the junkyard Gen 5 M90 blower, like we've been getting from the wrecking yard, is it too big for the 2.2-liter Dodge turbo motor? So what I want to know from you guys, Dodge turbo motor, 2.2, or we could do slash 2.5, the big block. Is it too big? So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Is that size turbo, or rather that size blower, is it too big for that small motor? Because we want to run, we want an M90 of the world, obviously. And if we do that, that's one of the options, because that's a motor I'm going to be running in 2024. I'm hoping I'll get to run it in January. But the question is, we want to put some kind of blower on there. I'd like to try the AMR 500, which honestly I think is probably a little small for that application. But the M90 does the M90 go the other way for that particular motor? Let's say that motor actually makes, the way that we tested on the engine dyno with an optimized tune, and it's cold and header and yada yada. Let's say that thing makes 130 horsepower or something like that, NA. The way that we run it, is an M90 supercharger too big for that? So like if we run it, the way that it is if we run it the way that we run it, like with that 3.8-inch pulley, and that's the other thing to consider, is the Dodge crank pulley probably is smaller than the one that's on the 3800 V6. So the blower speed will actually be even lower. I don't know anybody that makes aftermarket pulleys for that are bigger than the factory one. I don't know why they would, but because, hey, do you want to detune your combination? Nobody wants to do that. So if we run that blower on there, it was designed to make 260 horsepower on the V6 and provide about 8 pounds of boost or so. Is that going to be too much on the 2.2? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. What do you guys think? What is the boost going to be if we were to run that blower at the same blower speed as we do on the V6, and it's making like 8 pounds? How much power is that going, or how much boost is that going to make? And then ultimately, what is the power going to be on a 2.2 liter that makes quite a bit less power than that thing NA? Although when we think about it, if we do some back calculating on our, I don't know, bench racing, I guess, if we do that, if we take a look at the NA version of the 3800, it actually doesn't make a ton of power in stock form, being low compression. So, it's not a ton, but it's got to be 50, 60, 70 or something like that, more than I think that 2.2 is going to make, because it's also low compression. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think that that blower would be too big? Would it make too much boost? It's going to be non-intercooled, because I don't know how we're going to sandwich an intercooler in there. I mean, I guess I could use that TIC Performance intercooler and just have this massive thing, on one side of it. It would be interesting to say the least, but it'll be cool, I think. But would like an M62 maybe be a better choice for that? I talked to Brian at the car farm and Ben, and they were talking about maybe putting a blower on there, and they're leaning more toward an M62, which I think would be better. Ultimately, I think it probably would be a better choice, but bigger, as we know, bigger obviously is better. But I think for a guy driving around on the street, an M62 would be more than enough on this, because I think that they're applying it to what was originally an NA version of one of these motors, maybe even a Shelby version, which was rated at 105 or 7 or something like that. So it may do a little bit more higher compression, and the cam has been retarded, I think, is what they did back on that particular deal, and a different intake manifold and stuff than the one we're running with the blower. So all that would be cool. And then with rather in lieu of an intercooler, you could run the water methanol injection, or just methanol injection, or maybe just inject the E85. Has anybody ever tried that? Let me know in the comments. Have you guys ever tried running something on pump gas and then using a water methanol injection system to inject E85? And if you did, how much do you think that would help? It's a little side tangent here for our combination. Most people right now are saying that. How many people do we have? We got 92% saying no and 37 votes. Everybody rock the vote over there. Is a Junkyard Gen 5 M90 blower too big for the 2.2, 2.5 Dodge turbo motor? And then the question becomes after that, do we need to run the blower and the turbo? Obviously, if we did a poll for that, I would hope that, short of the knuckleheads that want to ruin the fun for everybody, that should be 100% poll. I would think you got to run both of those. The Ben from the Car Farm sent me a listing that somebody had for a Chevy Sprint Turbo. Like all of these, there are some issues with it. But it would be interesting to run. If I had that car, I would love to have one of those cars again for the right kind of deal. And then be able to run, because it has a factory turbo, and then be able to run that would be a really good application for an AMR 500, not an M90 on that 1 liter. That probably would be too big, depending on how much power you're trying to make. But in the discussion on the 2.2 liter and the 2.5 liter Dodge, I mean, look what guys do to these motors and how much they turn them up with the turbos. I mean, 200 at the tire is not a hard thing to do with those things with turbos on them. And then if you do turbo upgrades, there are guys that are making more than 600. So if you really get after it, they have the potential to do that. And they have the potential to basically do anything that M90 could possibly supply. We're up at 615 horsepower right now, which we think we're going to go farther than that, which would be good. So let me know what you guys think. I'm curious to see if you guys think that the M90 would be a good application for it, or maybe step down to the 62 or whatever. Because if you're going to go to the trouble of building some kind of bracket, or we can offset mount the blower. We could even really, if we did it on the engine dyno, which makes life a little easier because we have more room to do stuff, we can kind of remote mount the blower and then have it go through an intercooler. Maybe something bigger than the factory 2.2 turbo, but we could have it go through an air to water intercooler or something, and that way that it would work. That way we would have intercooling, because obviously the discharge coming out of a supercharger, that temperature is going to be higher than it would be coming out of a turbo. The blower guys can all argue with that, but that's been my experience, is it, especially coming from a Roots blower. At a given boost level, the temperature is going to be higher than it is coming out of a turbo at that same boost level, especially if the turbo is sized so that it's, fairly efficient at that flow and boost level. All good stuff. Happy New Year to everybody. If I don't see you later tonight, I might be on later tonight. If I am, you guys will hopefully know I can get on before it's time to start celebrating. We probably are not partying like it's 1999. I kind of doubt that. Let's see what you guys got going. If I can put a 4.9 kidney bell on a 4.6, it's fine. Well, that's how you match it, right? You make the displacement equal to the displacement of the motor. That's how you know that it's good, right? 2.2. Happy New Year's. Perfect size. M90 plus 2.2. Bop, 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 bop. Richard, I was on Spotify, and all of a sudden I hear Richard. Let's talk tech. See? The LSJ didn't have a smaller supercharger. The Ecotech thing, or the EcoBoost one? Didn't that have didn't those 2-liter motors or whatever, didn't they have M62s on them? I was watching an Asian man build an underground fort, which is awesome. I would be all in on that. Then Richard is live. That's right. Did you get my message about the intake manifold and cam? I don't think so. What was it? Where did you send it to? Did you email it to me? I hope. Just put a nitrous plate on with no jets, and there's 500 horsepower. We did that with a plate setup, but it doesn't flow enough to make 500 horsepower. It flowed enough to make about 300. No such thing as too big of a supercharger. I'm guessing the 2.2 liter head intake is worse, so probably more boost. Yeah, it would definitely. It has a lower NA power output than the 3800, so the boost pressure would definitely be higher. Water meth nozzle sounds easier than an intercooler. It does. It would make life a lot easier. No water, just methanol. Okay. Didn't old school Pro Charger kits come with an extra injector to go into the intake to add fuel? Some of the throttle body injected deals did that way back, but I haven't seen an extra injector on anything for a long time. All the Buick guys run straight methanol. Where are they buying the methanol from? Injection is nice, Mike. Yep, I'm running stock heads for now and flat top. 224, 231, 480 lift, small block Chevy 350. It says stock converter. I know very little about the V8 stuff. A 224 cam on a 350 is going to want something more than a stock converter, depending on what stock actually is. Because if you get a stock converter for an old Turbo 400 with an LT1 or something, then that converter probably has a high enough stall. But anything that's going to be like 1800, a 224 cam would be happier with something more than that. Off topic, but this is the first chance I've had to catch you live. Is there anything I could get your build list for the 496 stroker? I don't have a build list for it. I only have what's listed in the video. Blowers are never too big, just pulley changes. That's right. And we talked about that a little bit. You would leave the 3.8 inch blower pulley on there, and I think that the 2.2 has a smaller damper on it. So you could put a smaller one and kind of slow it down if you wanted to bring the boost down. Are you going to put the ported bigger throttle body M90 back on the 3800? I can once we get it back from, I sent both of them out to the guys from Joker. So they're going to do the ported versions. They're doing 2 of them for good reason, obviously. But we could run one of those on the 3800. But I'm going to do a big bang on the 3800 with a turbo. There's a direct connection supercharger kit. I remember that one. Used an M35. I never even heard of that. Not very common, but they're out there. I think they were comparable to the T1 at 150. Okay. I've heard of M45s, and that's pretty common. I haven't heard of the M35 though. Getaway. What's going on? Jet, rocket surgeon. Everybody's here. You can mount the supercharger like the M90 on the 89 Ford Thunderbird and use a chili bomb. Yeah, you could do a remote deal. It would kind of be cool to do the Super Coupe one with that intercooler. I just like the tube that says intercooled on. I have a question. There are no dumb questions. There are only good questions. Maybe similar to have a 4.73 Power Stroke. Can I steal a twin turbo and put it on a GT350? Yes, you can. Does a 7.3, is it a twin turbo on a 7.3 Power Stroke? I thought it was a single turbo. I'm not a diesel expert, but yeah, you can run 2 of those turbos on a different gas motor. Turbo Sentra, it was Instagram. Okay, I'll take a look at that when I don't have my phone with me right now. Curious if an electric water pump will keep up to a turbo LS on a track car. I don't think so. I think it would be fine for a quick drag race thing, but not for a road race car. CJ, I just got the Fiero 2.8 V6 running after swapping the factory EFI back on after removing the Edelbrock carb intake. Cold starts are the best now up in Minnesota. Good. So it's all running good. It's nice when it's working. Todd, what's going on, man? Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Todd. Good technical support. That's why we're here. Fixed the oil leaks from the lower intake. Found out it was leaking oil up through the lock washers. Now with the factory intake and flange bolt, it does not leak up through the bolts. Yeah. We get that with water on big block Chevys too. If you use a stud, it wants to come up through the threads. If you use a bolt on the head, you don't normally have that problem, although we tend to put sealant on all that stuff. Oh, Todd, you got the flu? Also watching Captain Sparkles play. Did you get the carb to M90 adapter yet? I'm putting a 38 Weber adapter together this week for the Thunderbird supercharged M90 Super Coupe. I haven't made one yet, but that is on the list. Put an M90 on a Saturn Ion non-redline. Brian, Happy New Year, Richard. I came in late today. What makes higher boost charge temperatures, roots, centrifugal turbos? A root supercharger is the least efficient of those. So at any given boost level, especially as you go higher in boost levels, a roots blower normally is pretty good in the 7 pound range or something like that, in the single digit boost ranges. As you go up, like if you try to run 20 pounds on those things, the temperature exiting the roots blower gets really, really high. Centrifugals can be really good because they're essentially a turbo impeller. They're just spun mechanically, and turbos are obviously very good too. It's my favorite jet educational. Richard, I'm in no rush. Still need to pull the engine from the donor. Okay. Yeah, I'll get on there and answer it. Went to my lungs 2 days ago. Cut my smoking in half. That's not good, Todd. No smoking. Is there a Junkyard Gen 5? Is the Junkyard Gen 5 M90 blower too big for the 2.2 liter turbo motor? And obviously, should you run it with both of those? Because while it might be too big for the NA motor, it's not too big for the turbocharged combination because it makes a lot more power. I checked on the 4.3 liter Vortec Turbo ZR2 at 1500 RPM, 5 PSI brake boosting. Just shows how small the turbo is. So you have a turbo from a 4.23 liter, or do you have a turbo 4.3 liter? Currently trying to calculate my compression to determine what heads I should buy. What measurement do I put in the deck clearance portion of the calculator? It depends on what your deck height is. How far down is the piston in the hole? Because that has a big effect, obviously, on static compression. Most people, when you're building a motor, tend to try to make it zero deck so that the piston is flush with the top of the deck surface of the block. It's not always the case. A lot of factory LS motors are actually out of the deck by between 5 and as much as 10 thousandths. I don't normally see them at 10, but 5, 6, 7 is not unusual. Sometimes a lot of the factory stuff, especially older stuff, Dodge stuff, is like this. It's way down in the hole. That's one of the things that they did, is put the piston way down in the hole to lower compression. Does the M90 have a boost map or equivalent? There may be something on an Eaton site that you can take a look at. They probably have a compressor map for that, sort of. I'm in the process of adapting the GM 3800 M90 to the Chevy Cruze 1.8 liter with a front mount intercooler, air to air with a standard OEM pulley, just looking to make 10 pounds. That'll be cool. Send me a picture of that when you're done with that. That's a cool project. If I can find one, can you carb a 3.8 liter with a supercharger, and what is needed to bolt it to a turbo 400? You can run a carburetor in front of the blower. I mean, it'd be behind the blower technically, the way that one is set up. But you can have fuel go through the blower. There are guys that have done that, and I want to try it and see how it works. 2003 Chevy S10 ZR2 5-speed 4x4, which I put a remote turbo mount on. Okay, so it was a 4.3 liter, and then you turbocharge, right? I know somebody wanted 7 PSI at 1500 recently. We couldn't figure out why. Okay. So you were power braking it and got 5 PSI at 1500 RPM. Okay. The show could break down doors with multiple Z's, which is the best way to spell it. So 350 board, 30 over, and stroke to 383. Yeah, I don't know where the piston is because none of that tells me that. I don't know the correct name for the blower turbo, but there are 2 of them. Okay, if it is a 7.3 diesel, then it's going to be a turbo, and it is a twin turbo. Okay, I just don't know. I'm not a diesel guy. I was wondering because the truck is a 5,000 RPM motor and a car is 7,800. I was worried about the spin rate. That's not going to be an issue. I say do it and let it eat. Maybe the inlet air temperatures will be lower. It won't have to spin it as hard. Actually, the inlet air temp, even spinning the blower with less blower speed, if the pressure is there, that's going to all but dictate what the temperature is. Having trouble finding any information on the block. Block numbers come back to a 352 bolt or 4 bolt with no specific car and a tune port injection intake. I'd be surprised if you had a tune port motor that was a 4 bolt block. But for what you're doing, it probably doesn't matter. You're not trying to make 1,000,000 horsepower with it, right? So our poll doing is at 90%, saying that's not too big. It's fine. M90 the world. If it was a TPI, it would be a roller. It doesn't have to be a roller on a tune port. The early ones were not roller blocks. Like I had an 85, and that was still a flat tappet. They didn't go to hydraulic roller till later. I like my 85 Corvette. It was a Z51 car, and it was an iron headed one before they went to the aluminum heads. I wish it was an aluminum headed one, which would be cool. But the thing was like dead consistent. You're the reason I did a turbo 4.3 liter instead of the LS swap in search of a 300 horsepower 4.3 liter Vortec, and it makes all the right noises. That's cool. So how did you? What is it? A 4.3 liter with a multi-port like intake manifold on it? What intake is on it? It's not the CFI like the spider injection deal, is it? I'm curious to see what it is. Or is it a carbureted one, a blow through? What is it? I don't have any experience on either converting or trying to increase the flow rate of those spider injection sinks. I've never even tried it. But it would be cool because I like those 4.3 liters. I forgot the 85s. My earliest is an 86 with aluminum heads. And then in 86, if I remember right, this is way back, I thought that only the convertible Corvettes got aluminum heads and that the coupes did not. And then so you had 86s that still had iron heads, and then everybody got them in 87. If it's been a long time. Would it be better to put a nitrous kit or something like that on a car, or the twin turbo? I'd be stealing the twin turbos from my truck. Well, if the truck is a running truck, I'd leave those on there, because if you're putting turbos on there, you could go get turbos that are really, really cheap online. Stock spider injection budget build with decap injectors and 450 liter per hour pump. Okay. So isn't this? I just don't know what the spider injection looks like. What the injectors actually look like. Richard, what are your top testing interests for 2024? I've got some secret things I'm working on that are going to be first. I hesitate to talk about things that I haven't done yet, because what happens is some of the bigger, TV guys and stuff and YouTube guys, they just take the ideas because they have the budget for it and they can make it happen right away. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to talk about what's going to happen. I'm going to only talk about what has already happened. Back in the day, I had a Nissan Frontier VG33 with an M62 with a 12-pound pulley. It was a fun truck. That was cool. Katie, yours came out of convertible. I thought that's what it was, if I remember right. So a few pictures of the Chevy Cruze project. Cool. I'm curious to see that. Strider injectors are tiny with about 1-inch plastic tubes. I remember the tubes. I've seen the insides of them. I just didn't know how people upgrade those. They upgrade. Are they bigger injectors or higher flow ends for those, or what do they do? 2-bolt. My pistons are recessed. So do I put a positive deck clearance with the length from the piston to the deck at the top of the stroke? The way that you normally measure deck height is you have what's called a bridge, and what it is a little arc thing with a dial indicator on it, and you put the bridge on the deck of the block, and then you zero it, and then you move your dial indicator down to where the piston is. Not in if the piston is a dish, not into the dish of the piston, only to the flat part of the piston that would otherwise be parallel with the deck surface. And then you find out what that difference is. You move the piston up to TDC to where it doesn't go up any further and it's not going down. And then you can just measure it and see how far down or how far up it is either out of the deck or down below the deck. Goodness done it. 83 Shelby Charger has a small chamber head, sport tune suspension. Yep. Were any of the Vortec 350 Chevy engines 4-bolt mains? I think that they were. I think that the L31 stuff might have been 4-bolt stuff. Any cool ideas? Keep it yourself. I have some kid in Northern California trying to steal my car club name. Update notice, jet projection. L8T with a 3-liter Whipple LT4 fuel system, swapping a Silverado as a daily. It runs great. That is a good combination. So you're able to get enough fuel with the LT4 injectors and pump. And did you do anything to the cam lobe also? My Spiders are just decapped, but there's a company that sells 3 bigger sizes, of the largest being 72-pound Spider injectors. Oh, cool. So then all you have to do is tune it, right? Turbo size question. What cheap turbo do I put on a totally stock 403, 5 or 6 pounds, makes 85 horsepower, maximum torque at 2200, 5000 RPM? What 403-inch motor only makes 185 horsepower? The M90 would be great with a cog belt on a 5-cylinder Audi, and it would sound awesome. A left side 5-liter Lamborghini Gallardo V10, long tube stainless headers, bolts, and it fits in a 90/40/40 chassis. That would be cool. I would kind of like to do cog pulleys on this M90 ultimately, just so we never have to worry about belt slippage. Tim, what's going on? You're welcome. Any suggestions for budget heads for 91 Vortec 350? 91. You could get the actual Vortec heads from a later motor if that's not a Vortec headed motor. If you have Vortec heads on it already, then those are actually pretty good. Otherwise, you could look at the aluminum stuff, the Skip Whites and the AFR Enforcers of the world. How much does the M90 weigh? I don't know. They're not light. I'll have to weigh it the next time I have a complete one together. An Olds 403, and it's only making 185 horsepower. On a 403, I would put on one that only makes that much power. I would put that GT45 on it. E3 Shelby Chargers made a whole 13 horsepower more than stock. If the underbody of the solid is solid, I'd buy it for $1,500. Side note, I've recently heard of a station here in town with a 110 at the pump. I'm going to check it out. Cool. God pulleys, yeah. It makes life so much easier with a blower. L31 and 2500 and 3500 were mostly 4-bolt mains, and 1500s mostly 2 bolts. Sometimes GM threw in what was in stock if they had no 4 bolts. For a few days, everybody got 2 bolts. I would think so. I would think that it would be stuff that's coming down the assembly line, and they would, hey, this one's fine. Let's just use this. This would be good. Because it's more important for them to get it done and get it out than it is to, I guess, get it right. Get it right, yo. Chevy Cruze 1.8 liter. Oh, very cool. Let's look at that. Oh yeah, so adapter plate and then a discharge tube. Oh yeah, that is cool. And that is not a Gen 5, right? That's a series. That's a series 3. So that's in a pre 2004 one, right? Am I looking at that right? What did they put in the 2003 Cobra? Was bigger than M90. It was as an M112 supercharger on the 03 Cobras. Do I need all the EFI stuff, or can I go blow through carb turbo 2.2? You can do that. You can put a blower on it also, and then do a draw through the blower. But you could do a blow through 2.2. Dang, I've missed so much. Any news on a 2.5 motor yet? The 2.5 is not assembled. The 2.2 is a running motor. Single GT45 on my 440 with EFI would be cool. The Fuel Tech TBI actually looks decent for a TBI style. I want port injection, more compression, aluminum heads. Yep. Rex, what's going on? So our pull is down to 89%. So 11% thinking that that's too big of a supercharger. They wouldn't think twice about putting a 400 horsepower or 500 horsepower turbo on the motor, but the same blower. Although now technically, I guess the M90 now is a 600 horsepower blower. Although people don't think that that's the case. I certainly didn't way back when. I'm curious to see what's going to happen when we run the carburetor going into the blower, but I'm also curious to see if, and we didn't see this on the 3800, but people talk about, oh, if you run methanol injection or, some kind of injection, where we're putting liquid through the blower, that it helps seal up the blower and it makes more power. I certainly didn't see that. I didn't see that happen when we ran the what do we run? The snow boost cooler on the 3800. It did lower the charge temperature, but it didn't make more power. And because the other thing that's happening is it's displacing some of the airflow, and having an air turbine on there would probably show that. I'd kind of like to do that comparison and see what's going on. But I understand the theory behind sealing up you're just looking at the area, the distance. It's not that much. It's very, very small. But the distance between the rotor lobe and the inside diameter of the housing, whatever that spacing is, you can get air to bleed back past that. Makes the blower less efficient. And the theory is that, if you put some fuel in there, that stops that from happening. I don't know if that's a reality or not. Why does my young cats always start fighting when there's a good live stream on? The puppies do that too. Jimmy, thank you. Yeah, and everybody, a happy 2024. I wonder if some two-stroke oil would help the blower. It would definitely ignite in the combustion chamber. Um, but yeah, that's another thing, and that might, anything that would help, take up some of that space. No such thing as too big of a supercharger, just too weak of a bottom end. Yep, just pump theory. That's right. We definitely know that changing that clearance, like putting a Teflon strip or something, or coating the rotor, also does that. I bet a draw through on the M90 helps keep the rotors cool before and during the pull. It would definitely change the charge temperature if we introduce fuel into that, and especially if we introduce E85 into that, that would be really good. My ultimate engine swap for 944 would be aluminum 5-cylinder that comes on the later RS3. Nice. It's not too big. We are running an M90 Jaguar on a 2-liter 16-valve Opel Vauxhall motor. Future plans run to M122. Nice. So how much boost is that thing making on the Opel motor? I have 3 2.5 motors. Only one I have really put any money into. It's a dependable motor and easy to work on. The hits just need a few cooling modifications, but just piston and springs change everything. What did you do to the pistons? Did you change the compression on them? Springs are definitely a good idea. Right now we have stock springs on it, which I'm kind of worried about, especially since they're old stock springs. Richard, I like that the motor says turbo on the valve cover, not economy boost or something corny. Yeah, that's cool. I also have one that says Shelby on it, and those are the desirable valve covers. I like the turbo one too. I can hear the puppies walking around. Oh, by the way, if you guys haven't seen it, I put the video up comparing the 4.8 liter to the 5.3 liter, the high horsepower runs that we made with each one of those, because that's why we stepped up from the 4.8 liter, and I think that the 4.8 liter is probably broke. Stepped up from the 4.8 liter to the 5.3 liter, and the 5.3 liter makes a lot more power than the 4.8 does. 411, like 130 or 40 horsepower more NA. So we wanted to show what that does, running the same blower on. And the interesting thing is, and I haven't seen a guy comment on this, because I'm surprised that all of the math guys haven't figured this out, that the NA motor made 130 or 40 horsepower more than the 5.3. NA made 130 or 40 more horsepower than the 4.8, but didn't make that much more under boost. And so why is that? And obviously the answer is because we're getting near the flow limit of the supercharger. It's certainly in its configuration that we ran it in, with the way that the entry was done and poured and stuff. And now I'm kind of kicking myself for not cutting a bigger section off that flange and making that a 4-inch inlet and not a 3.5-inch inlet. I should have gone to 4-inch, because we're getting near the power level and the flow level of that blower, where I think it needs more than a 92 millimeter throttle body. I think it needs 102 or 105 millimeter throttle body. Any experience with Hughes engines, Mopar camshafts? I haven't, although I have heard good things about them. My M90 came off a 98 Grand Prix. Yeah, that's an early one. I just look at the throttle body flange, because it has the throttle body mass air combination throttle body on there. Is there a point of diminishing returns when it comes to intake, charge, air cooling, and being able to put more timing in it? I get all applications are unique, but in general, intake temp that you observe, I don't. If you're looking for some sort of intake number, I don't know what that is. You want it as cold as possible. The colder that you can make it, the better it is. There's no being too cold. If you could make it negative 600 degrees, well, I don't know how much better that would be than negative 500 degrees. But if you could make it below zero, that would be great. Like we saw with the compressed air supercharging guys, their charge temperature is below zero. So that's why they're able to run full timing, and also why they're able to more than double the power output of their NA power on their test motor with like 7 or 8 pounds. So get it as cold as you can. I have the NA head, and it doesn't say it doesn't say turbo on it. You mean the valve cover doesn't say that? 4.8 liter was loving the blower. Yeah, they both did. Katie's boosted. Yeah, it's not hard. I could have done it at 14, no fear. Tell you what, for EFI management, yada, yada, yada. 1.3 bar on the Opal, 19 pounds, and adding 100 horsepower to nitrous. Nice. I like that. You guys are stepping up your game. I'm sure that, or I would think that that has an intercooler on it also. M90 on the D16, Super D. That's right, the big D. That's kind of the same thing. I mean, at least in the same kind of power output. So if you got a D16 VTEC motor, I think I want to say that those were. I remember with the blower on the Jackson Racing deal, we were struggling to get to 200 at the wheels on my 93 SI. But I think that was with I want to say that was an M45 that we were trying to do it with. And that's part of the reason that we weren't able to do it. A 90 would have put us there easy, and a turbo did put us there very easy. How much horsepower do you think it's possible with a turbo 383? Nothing specific early in the build, just trying to figure out what route to go. The 383 has nothing to do with how much power you can make, other than is it strong enough, because you can add a turbo or turbos enough to make 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 horsepower, whatever that is, as long as the motor will withstand it. It's probably not going to be. So you take the NA power output and then you double it at 15 pounds. Let's say it's 14.7, but double it at 15 pounds. And then you get an idea of where the power can be. And it's just a multiplier with the turbo. Didn't you build a manifold for twin M90s? Not a manifold. It's just an adapter. 4.8 versus 5.3 horsepower, weight, power. The 4.8 and the 5.3 weigh exactly the same. There's water to air intercooler between the M90 and the intake manifold. Okay, yep, makes sense. Yep. In the process of wiring a microsquirt. Richard, is there a way to reach you without connecting you with? If you have questions, you should ask them here, and it doesn't matter about the topic. Once we're doing the live feed and we're doing questioning and answering, as you've seen here, we can talk about anything. It doesn't matter. So if you have questions, you can ask them, or you can send me an email. Yeah, I know who's the 11% and why exactly. It shouldn't be 11%. It should be 0%. You have the best job. It's a lot of work. This part, sitting and talking to people, that's pretty easy. But this isn't the job. This is the reward. 7-Eleven rewards. Go beverage. Take a week off. Yeah, this isn't the part of it. All the traveling and dyno testing and building and making sure everything's going to work, and then even running it on the dyno is actually the easy part, or the less work part. A lot of times the stuff on the dyno, if I do a lot of swapping, like if I want to swap 6 or 8 or 10 camshafts or whatever, or that many cylinder heads or whatever, that's a little bit more work. But once it's on the dyno and I'm testing things, that's pretty good. Once the motor's running and I'm making pulls, that's like, again, that's the easy part. It's all the stuff that happens before that all the organizing and building and assembling and testing and mocking up. Currently in the middle of building a 5.3 for my SN95. I'm curious about using a sloppy stage 3 cam with a VS Racing 7875 turbo. I'm curious about a budget intake option that looks good. If you're trying to find one for looks, that's going to be subjective. So that's going to kind of be on you. You can put the sniper type fabricated manifolds on there. I personally wouldn't use that camshaft on a 5.3. for a turbo, especially a 7875 or 7876. That's too big of a camshaft. Unless you want to rev the thing to 8,000 or something, and I don't know how stable that camshaft is going to be out there. I wouldn't use that camshaft because it's going to be soft with that turbo on a 5.3. I'd put a much smaller camshaft on there. My dad just got remanufactured heads from Napa, and there are two different numbers on. For a 6-liter, it's a plow truck, and the head numbers are 317 and 243. Those are not the same head. So one of those has a much smaller chamber than the other. The 243s would be better if he has two of those, or if he's going to put them on, and I mean, it'll work and it'll run, but one side of the motor is going to have higher compression than the other, because one of those is like a 62 or 63 cc chamber or 64, and the other one is a 70 or 71 or 72, depending on, I've seen variations. But the 317 has a much bigger combustion chamber than the 243. So go the sloppy best or sloppy stage 2. Yeah, I would pick the sloppy best maybe over a sloppy stage 2, or even a Truck Norris or something, a Chupacabra or whatever you can find on sale. I like running a smaller cam with something that's 1,000 horsepower or less turbo, because you just get more response rate, and the turbo is ultimately going to dictate how much power you have. So take a look at the videos I have up where we compare the sloppy stage 2 to like the Truck Norris. We've also I've run the best cam. I have a video up on that. The best cam would kind of be between a Truck Norris and a sloppy stage 2, because it's bigger than the Truck Norris, but smaller than a sloppy stage 2. Do you have any insight on a Roadtrek C3094 on a Hayabusa Gen 1? That's definitely other guys trying to figure out the budget fuel injection system, 8 injectors, the 85. I don't know what the flow limit is on that supercharger, but I would think that it would be enough to feed a Hayabusa. I would probably pick a turbo over that, but it will definitely work. That's cool. What is the Hayabusa going in? Is it on a bike? Is that what you're doing? I watch every video you've posted, just trying to have a healthy chop, great for turbo application. Yeah, if you want that, if you want to have the cam sound, then a sloppy stage 2 would be fine. But with that chop goes also reduced response. In my opinion, I think that the Truck Norris has some chop, but it just has better low speed response. And I don't know what converter you're using, or if it's a manual trans or whatever. Sloppy stage 3 on a 6-liter, 7875 pulls, great on a 91 S10. But before turbo power fell off at 7,200. Beyond a properly sized intake, heads, cam, valve train, compression, exhaust, what strategy would you take to maintain decent drivability along with a reasonable reliability and a high power band up to 8,000? You're at two opposite ends of the spectrum. The drivability and reliability on a motor that wants to make power at 8,000 RPM, you're not going to have both of those. An 8,000 RPM motor is going to have a big enough camshaft in it and a short enough runner intake and a high enough flowing head to where it's not going to be a good driver. Ever thought about testing bike carbs on a V8? I've seen that, and it might be interesting. I don't have access to a whole bunch of bike carbs, like your variable length intake runner setup. That would be cool to do an IR deal on that, but I don't know how much the bike carbs flow for a V8 and V8 combination. What cam should we look for a little more chop than a sloppy stage 2? Well, you could have something that has that duration, and you could tighten the lobe separation angle up, and that will hurt idle quality and give you some chop. Turbo 400 manual valve body converter is to be decided after I purchase the cam. Okay. And again, the camshaft, as we've talked about a number of times, the camshaft is like completely subjective. I can tell you what the cam does. I can show you on a dyno curve what the cams do. and one of them makes more low speed power, one of them makes more top end power, whatever. And then you get to decide where do I want the power for one thing, and that's just one part of it. And then if I want the more peak power, I'm usually testing them at the same boost level. So that's not even a real test. I mean, ultimately, if you want to make more power, you could make more power with a smaller cam because the turbo dictates that. So until you run out of turbo, you just keep turning the boost up and make more power. So then also down low, do you want the chop? Do you want it to sound like it's cammy? Some people want that when they're driving around. Some people want it to sound cool. That's all part of the cam decision-making process. Thinking of getting the only cam Hughes has for a 3.9 liter Dodge. They do make one for a 3.9 liter Dodge, 197-203. That seems like a pretty small cam. I mean, how much bigger is that than the factory cam? A set of key-in flat slides on a V8. Yeah, that's possible. Like I said, I just don't know what the flow rate of the carburetor is, but trying to figure out a budget EFI system for primary and secondary injectors. Does anybody have any suggestions for Blaine on? You're running a 4-cylinder and then you're running 2 sets of injectors. So I don't know how they do. I don't know about the EFI system and stage injectors on those. Never seen bike carbs on the V8. I have an 8,000 RPM, 4.8 liter, but low end and cruising was terrible. And Choppy also used the cheap lifter trays instead of the factory ones, spun 4 lifters after a year of driving. Were you using used lifter trays or were you using the knockoff lifter trays? Because a factory lifter tray will keep the lifter straight because there's nothing wanting to rotate it. The only thing that happens is they get either worn out with really, really high mileage. And I'm talking about really high mileage because we're running 7,700. We have 100 or more runs on the 5.3, the L83 with the original factory trays. And I have no idea how many miles this thing has on. It has a lot. So the factory lifter trays and factory replacement lifter trays work well. The stuff from China does not because the opening is bigger than the factory one. The tolerances are much better on the factory ones. So those will work. So you don't need link bar lifters or anything for 8,000 RPM. You can use the factory ones as long as you use good ones. I know you're not a diesel guy, but would you be able to recommend a turbo size upgrade for my 3208 Cat? It's a 10.4 liter V8, 250 horsepower. Power goal is 400 and to 500, 450 horsepower after the fueling upgrades. I don't really know. 450 horsepower is not a really big turbo. The torque is going to be tremendous on that kind of gain, which you're almost doubling the horsepower. You're going to be probably doubling the torque too, so that's going to be sizable. Talk to the guys there are obviously lots of diesel guys out there that have turbo upgrades. Maybe I wonder if Robert at Force Performance might be able to help you get an idea on that. I want the cam to have noises. I want pops and bangs. you want the Harley Davidson idle quality. V8 on bike carbs might need 16 carbs. Yeah, similar to ITB setups. Just picked up some carbs off eBay. Each one should flow 200 CFM. Yeah, and see that's you're limiting. That's like putting a small cylinder head on there too. Keywords: decent drivability along with reasonable reliability. My 232, 240. Cam lost drivability under 2,500. My question is better intake design and proper matched cam heads for a wider power band. I don't think you're going to, even with a short runner intake, which is what you're going to need, and lots of head flow, I don't think you're going to get a cam to make power at 8,000 RPM. I don't think that, you could try to wiggle around all of these things and try to get something that runs up there. But short of having a VTEC Honda, you're just not going to get it. I don't see the factory or OEM numbers on my lifter tray replacements. Yeah, there are lots of not good ones out there. 8,000 RPM 4.8 liter had brand new knockoff lifter trays. Not only was the opening bigger, but they were very flimsy or bendable compared to the factory ones. Yeah, so they're using a cheaper material, and the tolerances are not good. Trying to avoid cam surge, smooth acceleration without coughing and asking to feather the throttle or downshift on hills. Yeah, again, it's going to be hard to get that sort of range. M90 with the smallest pulley and the largest crank pulley on the Omni. Do I need different valve spring retainers and rockers for Extreme Energy 268 cam? You don't need different rockers. You might need a different rocker because you might have spring interference with the factory rocker. We've run factory rockers on a Extreme Energy 268 cam if they're the stamped steel ones. I like to get rid of the factory jam nuts on those, or the pinch nuts. I don't like those. We normally always go with a poly lock on there, even if we're using the factory rockers. You will definitely need, I don't know about your retainer. You're going to need different springs. And normally that would come with a retainer or a spring that utilizes the factory retainer. Sometimes you can get away with that. Also, I don't know if that's a press-in rocker stud on the heads that you have, but you probably would need screw-in studs. Here, I'm late, but only one M90 for the 2.2. Thought we were doing dual M90s on the 2.2. Yeah, just so one obviously isn't too big. Two of them is still good. Factory lift on 3.9 Dodge is the same as the 5.2 liter. Plumb propane to the exhaust pipes and set spark plugs. Yeah. Did anybody else see there was a thing on? And I thought it was going to be from Garrett, but somebody had a helicopter that they zip tied or bolted all of these fireworks to, and they were all like bottle rock, not bottle rockets, like Roman candles. And so he took off in the helicopter and ignited these things. And so it was like he was shooting all this stuff. It's pretty cool. It's a huge hit on Instagram. It had 1.5 million views or something on it, but it was very, very cool. If you're going for 1,000 horsepower on a 383, I wouldn't build a 383 that I was trying to make 1,000 horsepower with. I would do something else, but the compression would be dictated by what octane you're wanting to run. And so if you're trying to make, if you're trying to do it on pump gas, I wouldn't try to do that. And if you were, I would run lower compression. And for cylinder heads, I would put the best set of cylinder heads that you could put on there, like an Airflow Research head or something. A cam, again, it depends on the cam choice, would be availability or drivability and converter and all that stuff. I have some 383 videos up, so you can take a look at those and see what kind of NA power output you want. But it's not hard to make like 500 horsepower from an NA 383, and then you just add boost on top of that, and you're at 1,000 horsepower. What time will you be on tonight? Normally I come on at 7 Pacific Standard Time. Factory cam on a 3.9 is 432 lift, 240, 248. The 240, 248, I'm sure, is an advertised number, right? Or a lot of times the factory don't even use an advertised number that's comparable to other stuff. But yeah, that's not going to be a 50 number. That'd be a really big camshaft, although it'd be a very, very low lift, very high duration thing. It'd be pretty stable probably. Still at 89%, and we got 1 more minute, so we can get rid of our poll here at 89%. I'll end our poll. If you have not, please go take a look at the video that I put up, 4.8 versus 5.3 liter. Basically, what it shows what happens when we step up in naturally aspirated power output. That's a good way to go when you're limited in either turbo size, or in this case, we're limited in blower size. This blower will spin enough and flow enough to support a given power level. And the best way to do that is if you make the NA combination more powerful, then we bring the boost down. And I think we messed up on our intercooler combination just because we weren't using all the intercooler, and that's something we'll fix coming up. Michael, what's going on? The Hughes is definitely better than stock. Hopefully Apple gives me the money they stole from me. That's not good. My S300, probably 9mm lift cam. Yes, everybody, if I don't come on tonight, I'm going to try to. But if I don't, everybody have a happy new year. Because, that's important. Everybody be safe. Make good choices. 2.2 liter S10 motor. That, I think, is the Iron Duke motor, isn't it? I would like to run an Iron Duke. I'd also like to run the, which I see people doing, we've talked about it for years now, the North Star motor too. Everybody wants to run the North Star motor, and I've been putting it off. I have one that I have available to me. S10 is the new iteration of the Iron Duke. Is it still a throttle body injected one? 9 p.m. in the UK. You guys are going to get there before us. Yes. Hopefully everybody had a good Christmas. And everybody have a safe new year so we can go into 2024 with lots of cool testing. And on that note, it is time to go. You guys be safe out there. And hopefully I will see you tonight.